Hey everyone. All right, I see Stuart. All right. Hey Gil. Hey, and hey Glenn. Is Glenn there?
Yeah.
Hey.
Hi, everybody.
Hi,
Cool.
everyone.
Cool. All right. I want to thank everyone for joining today. Before we get into it, I just want to get some high level feeling for, we've been hearing more and more about how companies are shifting left, but you all work for many different types of companies. I'm just curious to know if you've seen that transformation in your companies as well, and maybe some quick takeaways. I guess we'll go around the block here. So, Gil, we'll start with you and go around the square.
Oh, I think I've already shown my enthusiasm for shifting left. I've worked, even before Apply Tools, we're definitely shifting left. I've worked at Wix, at CloudShare, and before that at my own company, Web Collage. In all cases, developers were doing the brunt of the automated testing, definitely not the testing. I mean, we left the interesting testing, the user testing, the acceptance testing, the testing that finds the real bugs. That was what QA was for, but the brunt of automated testing was for shifting left. I don't really know how to work differently, so I think I'll pass that on to others.
Perfect. All right, Stuart, let's go with you now. Any thoughts?
Yeah, so I think, what we're doing at Dunelm right now, we've been through a big digital transformation, agile transformation, and the key thing that's really coming out of that is obviously how we shift not just the testing left, but the conversations we're having left, understanding our customers more and more. So, we've really evolved those practices within Dunelm. We're continuing to evolve that, continuing to learn from our mistakes because we are making some, and it's the best way to learn. So yeah, we're big advocates of that. We've set our platform, we've set our architecture up to support that way of working.
Very nice. How about you, Marie? Any thoughts?
Yep. So when I was doing my presentation a while ago, I talked about, why we're doing, the whole new design system. And it's because we had this tech reset. So the business identified that we have a lot of duplication across the business. So, we've started doing or making sure that with the new design system, we, reduce all these different inconsistencies and make sure that we all adhere to the same standard. So it was really vital for us to embed testing on the different areas, not just on the testing phase, but also during requirements or during tech analysis, that we make sure that we have all the different areas that we need to automate, for example, or if we need to, test something with accessibility, we need to be able to have all of these questions much earlier on rather than thinking it, when it's been handed over to a separate team, for example. So yeah, it's definitely started, to happen at News UK, especially within the product platforms team. We built, like high performing build pipelines, and we've got a lot of like quality checks on each of our workflow to make sure that we don't, deploy bugs in production.
Awesome. And I'm told Glenn is having issues with his camera, but he is here. So, Glenn, it's all
I
you.
am here. Sorry. I don't know why. I've got two cameras and it's switched to the other one, so I will try and fix that. I think from my perspective, we're definitely doing shift left in BT, but it is a journey. From a testing perspective, we've looked at some of the stuff that happens in our trials, in our live environment, and we've brought some of that an analysis of those issues into the test arena. But we're still finding lots of visual defects as part of that. And we're still struggling to change the mindset of our engineering community to really take ownership of quality. How do we find the time to do that as well as the actual getting something out the door? And if it's not easy to use and easy to maintain, we found that it doesn't happen. So, yeah, it's part of a journey. We're still navigating through that. And I think we've got to the point now where, just because we're using agile structures doesn't mean we're necessarily putting stuff out the door quicker. And there's a concern about quality, which often means that we don't get it out the door quicker. So, we're looking for help in order to do that and, produce quality quicker to the market. The telco is a very competitive market in the UK, and we need to be able to differentiate and have products that help us differentiate.
Awesome. And Glyn, just a quick tip. If you go to your URL on the top, there should be a little camera icon. If you click on it, it should give you an option to change the camera. Change the camera and then click refresh on your browser. You'll go blank and it should refresh. So hopefully that'll help.
Sorry. So again, click on the...
There should be a little icon of the camera.
Yep.
Drop down. All right, cool. All right,
yep.
So I just so you know, Applitools also has done a survey, and so I just want to pull out some highlights from the survey and get each expert's thoughts on it. So the first one is, and just so you know, a D went in ahead of time. A D works for Applitools, and she put it in Slido for me. Slido are used for questions, but we're using it just to display some survey questions. So here are some interesting results. For CI/CD, has been shown as a top priority for 59% of engineering teams. But 68% of people are saying they even failed to meet expectations or have yet to start with CI/CD. So since Glyn is now live, I see him on camera, I'm going to pull him in. Any thoughts on CI/CD, why people get it wrong or how they can help get that more efficient for them?
Yeah, I think what we've seen is, can you hear me okay? Just to
yes,
check.
sir. Yep.
Yeah. I think what we've found is with CI/CD, we've been implementing it for a while. We've been on our DevOps journey for a couple of years now. But as I say, although we've implemented Jenkins and we've done some of the core DevOps type things, I suppose our issue was you're only as good as your weakest link. Yeah, if you're you might be doing your automated deployments, but if the other activities in your that your testers or your developers are doing is manual, then that will slow things down. Yeah, so I think that's what we found, and also as part of that, continuous testing is a key thing. Yeah, how do we do testing? We talked about shift left. How do we do that earlier in the life cycle? How do we do that in a more automated way? How do we do that in a more optimized way, so we can discover defects more quickly, for example? So I think from my perspective, what we've learned is just by doing automated deployment or even automated builds alone is not getting us the results that we were expecting from DevOps and Agile. And as I say, a lot of the testing that we're doing, and actually we're a victim of automation can have its own problems. By doing automation, sometimes, yes, that quickens up some of the functional aspects, but whereas where we had manual testing going on before, where we were doing more explorative manual testing, we were finding some of the visual defects, and only then we were only finding some of those. We've actually got worse in terms of the number of visual defects. We have hundreds of visual defects making its way onto production every year, and that's a massive problem for us. So I think that's what we've learned. And what I would say about CI/CD is, I think, and more general, I think there's different trends now at the moment around, whereas before we used to have these monolithic things that we would buy and we'd think we'd get a good deal on, but then we'd only use part of the product, and it was kind of quite good at a lot of different things. What we're now seeing, and what I'm seeing, is more specific products that tackle specific problems. And especially as we go into this kind of COVID-19 world, we're being asked to justify the business cases and be very specific about the problems that we're trying to fix so we can prioritize those problems, and then get investment for those problems. We still use a lot of open source tools, but in a complex environment like BT, which is made up of lots of different customer-facing units, we've got probably more products than I know any other company in the world, even a lot of the banks. We need to cut through that complexity, and some of those, although there's some great open source products out there, they're not always doing the job for us in that kind of environment of complexity, and dealing between both doing agile and waterfall, legacy and cloud. How do we get that consistency that works across and cuts across that complexity? So I think that's what we've learned, that just doing CI/CD and just doing a bit of implementing Jenkins and Ansible, as good as those tools are, is not really getting us to where we need to be in the head of the competition.
Great. And Marie, I know based on your presentation, you did a large-scale implementation recently of, again, the visual grid and automation and general strategy across the company. Any suggestions on CI/CD, how to get folks started correctly that are struggling?
Yeah. So I think definitely first start with continuous integration, because I think if you go straight to continuous deployment or continuous delivery, it's definitely really, hard. So you have to make sure that you get the basics right first. And when a developer, or if you're a tester and you're automating something, just have to make sure that all your tests are part of the build pipeline. So one of the things that I mentioned in my presentation is that as tester, we now need to be more flexible. We now live in this like digital transformation era where it's not enough if we just know how to code. We also need to learn about, for example, how to integrate our tests on build pipelines, and at the same time still making sure that like we stay ahead on top of like other like quality issues. So it's definitely like hard to start. So I think in terms of like suggestions, just like start small. Visualize first what you want your workflow to be. So in our case, on our PRs or on our pull request workflow, we want to run as much as tests as we can, as possible, so we can catch all the different issues. And this is where AppliTools has helped us, because before, when we weren't using AppliTools, we get block in our pipeline because our tests were failing, and then we had to like rerun them again just to like make the test pass. However, now that we have AppliTools onboarded, it just makes our continuous integration pipeline much more seamless.
Awesome. Stuart, I know you speak to a lot of people. You do a lot in the community. Do you hear what people are struggling with, and do you have any thoughts on how you can help them with CI/CD implementations?
Yeah, I think kind of coming back to what Glyn was saying, actually, in terms of a lot of the time, we don't focus on the problems we're trying to solve. We just go all in and try and jump on a buzzword or jump into this way of working. And I think really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve, and automation. Implementing automation and implementing CI/CD is not a solution it's not a golden bullet or a silver bullet. It's something that will work really well when you identify all the other areas as well that kind of work alongside it. So coming back to what I was saying earlier about, if we're having the right conversations up front and we're all aligned as to what it is we want to deliver for our customers, and that kind of flows all the way through, then that makes it a lot easier for a start. Then when we start looking at how we automate, what we automate, the feedback loops are really important. So the idea of CI/CD is to get the feedback loops as valuable and as quick as possible. So having a pipeline that really runs a lot of functional testing at the UI layer, and that can be quite slow and fragile, doesn't give you that feedback. So it's really trying to understand the problems you're trying to solve by doing this. And one of the biggest things I always say to a lot of teams, and we've had this conversation so many times where I am now, is we actually need to slow down to speed it up. We try and go all in. We try and go really fast. We talk about how fast we want to deploy to production, but actually, do our customers really need it that quickly? What is the benefit that we're going to gain back from the ROI of the investment and the maintenance of speed? And we focus on speed with quality. So we're not looking at how we reduce quality, but quality is a metric which is quite hard to define. And it will have a different perspective dependent on what it is you're releasing and to what customers you're releasing. So, a level of quality is what is needed to get a product out, but that may vary depending on how early that product is in its life cycle and how fast you want feedback from real customers. So, not one shape fits all in this type of environment.
So, Stuart, you brought up a good point. It makes me think of sometimes companies look to other companies to see how they're doing things. They automatically think, well, Google does this, Facebook does it, so therefore I'll do continuous delivery. And they may not even have a need to do continuous delivery. So that may be one reason why a lot of people are failing. They have lowering expectations. I don't know if anyone else has seen that, but I have, talking to a lot of people for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, from my perspective, the way that we've approached digital transformation in BT is around using human-centered design, and actually using that method to actually understand, well, what are all the kind of problems? Where are the pain points? What are we trying to achieve? And actually speaking to customers and actually researching it and researching our stakeholders and then prioritizing some of those issues. And that's actually how we came around to ApplyTools. We'd been looking at automation. We were about to come up to a renewal on one of our automation tools. And we looked at a wider view around the automation piece. And we said, well, what are the kind of issues that we're facing around automation? And then actually, there was a lot of issues around, well, we're doing functional automation seems quite strong. And we're making inroads in terms of the automation tools that we're using, but we still had this visual problem. And we also had the point as well that we weren't getting the return of investment in terms of automation when we looked at the data that we were had originally hoped for. And that's because of lots of maintenance that had to take place. We'd invested in other, we tried other tools such as Eggplant, and we really struggled. Lots of high re-engineering efforts that we had didn't really work very well on mobile. So that's where we came across ApplyTools, because it was actually looking at the problems, making sure that they were the problems, they were the biggest problems using that human-centered design approach, looking at the data and actually saying, right, this is a massive problem for us. If we want to be, a differentiator in this competitive market, right, what do we need to do that? And as I say, that's how we started the conversation with ApplyTools.
Great. And Gil, wrap this up. Any thoughts on CI/CD?
Yes, I agree with everybody here. It's not the CI/CD tools themselves. That's not important. And to continue with what Stu is saying, and more the CI. And for me, CI/CD is always about small. Okay, you want to continuously push small incremental changes and test them. That is why CI is so important. So you want to push a little change, test everything. Push a little change, test everything. So you won't be testing like 3 months of changes and then, oh my God, nothing works. But you're testing like this 10-line change, everything works, 10-line change, everything works, 10-line change, oops, doesn't work, fix it, everything works again. If you do that in baby steps, CI is wow. But that means the tests need to be fast. And you need to work on that. Less end-to-end, less system, more unit, less functional across many browsers, more visual form factors using things like visual grids and ultra-fast grid.
Excellent. All right. So next thing is I'll show the slide to explain it better. Based on survey results, 64% of companies cite QA as the #1 bottleneck to faster releases. I've been hearing this for years. Yet 20 bugs escape per major release, costing millions annually. So curious to know, what are your thoughts on this statement, and how can we do better is what I would start off with. And let's start diagonal this time. So Stuart, I don't know if we started with you yet. So Stuart, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's quite an interesting stat. And I don't know kind of the companies that were surveyed and their ways of working and such like. But I think one of I've been in the industry for coming up to 22 years in QA. And this whole evolution around, quality or testing being a bottleneck versus, how do we trim the amount of testing we're doing and, trying to speed delivery up to production. But then also keep that quality in production. And I think it comes back to what I was saying earlier about understanding the level of quality that we need for any given release, because it's not necessarily going to be the same. And then you can apply that approach to, understanding your customer and understanding your products and so on and so on. And again, I think coming into more into agile ways of working, the idea is that we're breaking stuff down smaller so that we are able to identify issues quicker, and it's a lot easier to maintain smaller releases. I think the challenge that we've got in the industry is that whilst organizations are, implementing agile practices, they're still doing these big releases, coming back to the point that was made a moment ago about small incremental quick change feedback. So I think, we're kind of, how we've kind of approached this is quality is everybody's responsibility. The QAs in the team are ultimately accountable and they champion that. They're the advocates, but everybody is responsible, and that happens throughout the entire delivery process. So it's not just about the testing side of something. That's not where quality gets embedded. Quality gets embedded throughout.
And Maria, it sounds like this is actually your company doesn't have this issue that the people in this survey do. So what's the difference between your company's mindset compared to some companies that do say QA is a bottleneck still?
Yeah, I think it's not really fair to say that we don't experience this, because I know, like we still have some other teams who, like struggle, with releasing faster, but we are improving, our process like day to day, and we try to release multiple times a day if we can. And I think just in terms of, like tips or suggestions, because I still find it that, for example, if you have a team, the test automation part always falls on somebody else's responsibility. Whereas, as Stuart mentioned, it should be everyone's responsibility. Why don't you get the developers, to write the test? You don't have to, just have that responsibility by yourself. You can share it, because developers, they write code. They are, they are pretty what's that word? Like able, to help you write the automated tests. So I think it's very crucial to have this mindset that we shouldn't just leave test automation at the end, because it will really help us speed up our releases. As an example that we've done quite recently. So at News, within product platforms, we currently have this cache clearing service that's responsible for the updates of our tests of our articles that the user sees. Before having this within our team, we were asking for feedback in terms of the quality process, and we found out that this product alone was quite difficult to release, because the testing cycle takes about 2 days. So the first thing that we did was we looked at how we can improve this, because we can't have 2 days of testing cycle, because that will really hold up the releases to production. So we looked at different ways of trying to automate the tests, and we managed to to find a way. So now whenever we try to do releases to this particular product, we have a set of tests that helps us, and then we then review if the logs are showing as expected. So rather than having 2 days worth, it only takes like a couple of minutes. So it's those small changes that really helps for the QA pace not to be a bottleneck. So make sure to look out for all these different like issues, and try to resolve it as a team.
Great advice, Marie. Thank you. Gil, thoughts? At the last event in the US one, the joke was that 64% of testers said that developers are the number one bottleneck. So it always seems like QA gets blamed for everything. Being a developer, what say you?
Developers are horrible in that they don't test. I mean, no, seriously, I always give the example of validate email. Okay, so I have this form and there's an email in it, and I have to validate, check that all emails that are valid pass, and emails that are not valid don't pass. If a QA tester needs to do that, it will take them minutes just for that. Why? Because they need to use Selenium or whatever, go into the form, test one, test another. That loop of testing, like 30, 40, 50 takes a minute. How much time does it take a tester to write a unit test of that validate email function across 30 emails? To run, it's probably in the order of nanoseconds. Now, nanoseconds, 1 minute, I don't even know how to count the number of orders of magnitudes there are between these two. And most testing can be done by developers in unit and integration tests and not need those suites that take hours or even 10 minutes and are flaky. Testers need to do the brunt of work of testing so that QA will stop being the bottleneck, because QA can't run all those tests as fast as it's less flaky as developers can. Once developers have that brunt of testing, those test suites will not take a lot, because you're also not need to testing all the application. You just need to test the 4 or 5 packages that were changed. Once you do that, QA stops becoming a bottleneck because it's testing only the interesting bugs. A lot of companies, once they do that, once their test coverage by developers is good, they just deploy. That's continuous deployment. They just deploy to production and have their QA test in production as users, which for me is the best way. They're just finding the bugs faster than their users can in a real world environment and not in simulated staging environments, which never works. So for me, yes, QA are the bottleneck. The reason is the developers.
I love that answer. So Glyn, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm going to agree with everybody here, because I think what everybody's touched on is it's a bit of a mindset thing. The amount of conversations that I have, perhaps with our delivery folks, that we've got loads of defects that we found, and they almost speak to us as though we've done something wrong as testers by finding all these defects. Yeah. And the reality is that's our job. And the problem is the fact that we're finding often severe defects too late in the life cycle because those tests are not being done early enough. And there is that mindset that needs to happen with our engineering communities in order for them to take control of that quality. And as Gil quite rightly says, actually as testers, I'm trying to get my guys to do less testing and do more, become more experts in helping our engineering teams use the right tools and methods to implement quality. And it's for their benefit as well, right? If I'm a developer, I'm working on this kind of user story. I don't want to then be having to remind myself 4 weeks later when something comes back from testing about a user story I was doing 4 weeks ago, and then trying to remember what I did 4 weeks ago, et cetera, et cetera. So, even for the developer itself, it's in their benefit, but, having the right tools in order, it's quite a bridge to kind of gap, right? Testers are responsible for quality, developers are responsible for developing stuff. How do we bridge that gap and instill quality in that development process? And we need to make that as easy as possible. And that's actually one of the great draws when we saw Applitools, was how easy it was to invoke Applitools. And rather than developers having to write lots of code, which then needs to be maintained, and it only covers the stuff they know about, not everything that they don't know about as developers in terms of visual defects. As I say, it helps us cross that bridge and instill that quality and change that mindset that quality is the responsibility of the tester, and actually it's responsibility for everyone, and it starts with the developer.
Great. So this is kind of like a lightning question. I know it's not about tools, but everyone always asks me about tools. So what are 1 or 2 tools you think everyone should be using, or not everyone should be using because that doesn't apply, but 1 or 2 tools that's helped you make the transformation CI/CD to shift left and really get things rolling? Marie, any thoughts?
I might sound biased because I'm a Cypress ambassador, but I really like using Cypress, and it's the only tool that I've seen, within our company that, like developers are using it. And we've experimented with a lot of tools in the past. We've used WebDriver IO, and I think previously, we've used, Nightwatch, and it's just really a separate team's responsibility. Whereas I found out, if we use Cypress, everyone's writing the tests. A good example was yesterday, one of our developers that I'm working with on a different team just suggested that, I can write a Cypress integration test for this. And like having all those comments, really helps, because I don't have to worry about, this feature being deployed and, there's no test coverage because our developers are already writing the tests. So I think for me personally, Cypress really, help us. And I think from unit testing perspective, I think Jess is quite popular with the development community. Great tools. And I'm thinking, Gil, you're going to say the visual grid. What do you
thoughts on one or two tools.
Yeah, well, I'm a backend engineer. I don't use that. But the reason I came to AppleTools was that at Wix I tried doing visual testing with like regular visual testing tools, and it just didn't work. And then when Adam showed me and I tried it, and oh my God, it works. That's why. But so yeah, visual testing tools, AppleTools, ultra-fast grid, and the AppleTools toolset, yes. But as a backend engineer, for me, Docker is a game changer. It enables me to run a test that has like a queue and a database and everything, and just run it, pop everything up, run the test, and then pop everything down, like just as a normal test. That would have, like 10 years ago, I would have pulled my hairs out to make that kind of a test. So as a backend engineer, definitely Docker. As a front-end engineer, it's a less well-known technology, but front-end engineers know it. It's JSDOM. It's the ability to run user tests, functional UI tests with React or whatever as unit tests without even running a browser. So Node is running a simulation of a browser which runs all my user code apps, so I can test it functionally with a speed that is at least 10 times faster than running it in a browser. So that also, when at Wix I did front end, that was a huge game changer for me too.
Great. How about you, Stuart?
Yes, I think so. I mean, we at Dunelm, we re-platformed, we rebuilt our entire platform over the last kind of 12, 18 months and re-architected to microservices. And the one thing that kept burning us was contracts, or not testing contracts between our APIs. So we've spent a lot of time recently utilizing Pact to really kind of get that much faster feedback loop when we're running in our pipelines to do that contract testing. We were doing this previously really actually just through integration tests, and whilst it worked, it was, the feedback loops weren't quick enough, and we were getting a lot of problems with a payload would change and the consumer wouldn't understand that had changed and it would fail and so on and so on. So for me, we're spending a lot of time using Pact at the moment, implementing that. And the other thing I think as well is actually the monitoring around all this stuff. So it's great that we got the tools that will allow us to do stuff quicker, but if we haven't got tools in place to monitor, to give us feedback, then obviously it's not going to be valuable. So we've more recently started using a tool called Datadog from a monitoring perspective, and that gives us real great feedback from production, which also within our test environments and so on. But the stuff we gather from production really helps drive what it is we need to support from a testing perspective. So we understand what our customers are doing more, how they're using our applications, and what our RPS per second is per API and for performance testing. So those are two things that we've invested quite a lot in recently.
Nice. And Glyn?
Yeah, I think we've got a strong relationship with Broadcom at the moment, and there's actually through Broadcom that we actually got to AppleTools. And going back to the point I made earlier, that the world kind of changed a little bit. I remember there was a time when different software companies never talked to each other. Everyone was competition to everyone, and I think that's very different now. There is this kind of concept of ecosystems, and it's important that these, if you're going to be implementing tool sets into your CI/CD pipeline, that they work together. Yeah. So actually, having companies that actually are not constantly fighting each other and seeing each other as competition, but actually making sure that they can dovetail together into that, because I think that's where the strength comes, right? As I say, from my point of view, we're only as strong as our weakest link. So we've been doing lots of stuff with test data, automating that test data management process, having consistent test data, etc., using service virtualization, finding integration-related defects earlier in the process, test orchestration, putting it all together. So again, it's about not just using one product in isolation, but making sure that when we do have products that they kind of they integrate nice to each other, have plugins and things like that, so they work seamlessly. So so that's another one of our kind of great partners as well. And I think it's important to have partnerships where when you're using tools, that those products, that they put skin in the game as well, and they make sure that you're successful, and that they have confidence in the products that they're they're trying to sell to you. And that was the case with AppleTools. We felt that kind of confidence, and we felt that there was nothing quite like it in the market or from an open source perspective.
Great. So this panel is called The Future of DevOps and Quality in 2020 and Beyond. So I want to touch on the beyond piece. So you hear a lot about AI, machine learning. Any thoughts on how this is going to evolve over the years? And are there any like really hard testing problems now you see AI being able to assist you with in the next few years? Let's start with Glyn.
Well, I think first of all, if I think about AI, we've struggled at times with certain products that claim to have AI, and that's not necessarily because the products themselves automatically. So, for instance, we tried IBM Watson, and I'm not going to say IBM Watson, and actually a lot of the problem is to do with data. A company like BT, unfortunately, we have got lots of unstructured data, much more unstructured than it probably should be, but that's a reality. And I think certain machine learning systems struggle with that kind of, those kind of unstructured data. I think Applitools actually has a benefit from that point of view because it's not looking at the data itself, and actually the research around that machine learning is done by experts and taking lots of different data, good quality data, and then being able to then feed that into the machine learning system. So I think that's where we've struggled in the past. And I remember the days when testing was, we got excited when there was automated regression testing. And now we're starting to see things like model-based testing, various types of optimization techniques. So I think what I'm hoping is that, even things like emotional AI actually is something that we've even looked at as well, is how do we actually, really taking quality assurance to another level where we have people looking at products that we produce, apps, what's their reactions to it. So I think that's quite an interesting field at the moment, looking at people's facial expressions. Are they looking at the bit you want them to look at on the screen? So I'd be interested to see where that goes. But I think where the machine learning piece needs to get better for the future so that we can use some of these techniques more effectively is around that. How does it take data, particularly unstructured data, and make better sense of it? Because it takes too long at the moment to keep feeding machine learning and then not really getting the kind of results that you'd hope out of it.
So Marie, when you're looking at a testing strategy, AI, where does it fit in your time frame? Is it now? Do you see it a few years in the future, and how do you see it helping?
Yep. So since we're using Applitools AI comparison algorithm, to review or maintain our tests, this is already proving valuable to us as a team. Just by using all the different functionality from Applitools and making sure that if we have dynamic data, then all those different like dynamic on our page will be ignored by just simply adding a region. It's really helping us, whereas before we won't be able to achieve any of those just by using pixel by pixel. And at the same time, I know that other teams at News. So for example, we have data tech teams. So they invest heavily on AI and machine learning to basically understand what our readers are like to read, so they can make more valuable content. Wait, Bobby. But yeah, I think it's definitely we at News can definitely like benefit from, and it will improve not just our testing strategy, but the overall business goal as well.
Great. And Stuart?
Yeah, I think coming back to Glyn's point, I think it's going to be a bit of a slow burn, really. I think it's going to be one of those things that a bit like electric cars that have taken quite a while to get going, and all of a sudden it's people are putting their trust in them more and more, and but it does come back down to that data. Now we're really focusing on data science within Dunelm right now, and how we can utilize that data to the best of its ability to really drive the AI side of things, understanding our customers more, understanding how our applications need to work, and therefore how we would test them in that way, and learn from that in an automated fashion. But I think it's going to be something that's it will just take some time to really bed into the industry. Now, obviously Applitools are kind of ahead in that space for the market that they're in, which is amazing. But there's other areas that are just kind of getting on that, and I think it's just going to take some time. But it will definitely come. It will just be that trust thing, I think, more than anything.
Great. And Gil.
Yeah. I'll be controversial here. I think testing, and this is coming from an AI company, I think testing in AI is essentially overhyped. And I'll explain, because we are an AI testing company. It is overhyped because the last few years we have seen messages in that people were coming to me in conferences, is AI going to replace testers? So companies were hyping that their tools generate tests automatically. Not even close. I'm sorry. We're not going to get even close. I can't say anything more than 10 years, but certainly these next 10 years, we will not be seeing tools that replace QA or testers or developers or whatnot. We're not even close to that. What we are seeing, and we've been hearing that, is AI in visual testing. That's fine. Comparing images makes total sense. I mean, AI started in everything around images. AI in data sciences, understanding the trends of our customers. I can understand that. AI in saying, and a lot of those we can test everything companies have migrated down to, well, yeah, the button has maybe moved in the DOM, so we can figure out the selector for you. I can get that. Okay, I can get small niche things, and I can get big things in focused areas like visual testing, but I do not see the hype that has evolved in the last few years around, we are going to replace testers, we are going to write the tests for you. I have just not seen it.
All right, so I'm always amazed I could speak more than 5 minutes. It looks like I filled up all the time with my gab, so I wasn't able to get to the attendees' questions. So parting words of wisdom for future of testing. We'll go around the room from the top all the way to the bottom. So Gil, thoughts?
It's bright. It's wonderful. I love testing. I've been doing it since 2000. It's just getting better and better and better and better. A bright future, more and more tools. Love it.
Awesome. Stuart?
Yeah, so I've been in this industry for 22 years, as I said earlier. So it's changed a hell of a lot. It keeps changing. It's an exciting industry to be in. And yeah, if all the stuff we've spoken about today is just a small portion of that.
Awesome. And Marie?
Yep. So it's a really, great opportunity, for us to be part of, this movement now. And I just think that there's just going to be a lot more to look out for. And I'm just happy to, keep learning and try to implement all this back at work and also for my personal development. But yeah, it's a really great opportunity to be in at the moment.
Absolutely. And Glyn?
I've often, even before I was in testing, I've done numerous roles, and which has perhaps allowed me to appreciate testing a little bit more. Testing is really the key, and QA is really the key for companies to differentiate. And I think particularly the visual aspects, as I say, I work in a very competitive marketplace. And if we put stuff out visually, or if we've had problems at Black Friday before where, one of our biggest, where we get a lot of revenue come in. And if we've got problems and things, our content isn't quite right, or dynamic content is wrong or has been affected, or it massively affects our sales. It can cost millions and millions of pounds by just having visual issues, let alone something like EE. We own the EE brand, that's massively brought there's a specific demographic, and we need to be seen as cutting edge. And if we have visual issues, that is a massive impact on that demographic and what they think of us. So testing is absolutely crucial. We need to do it continuously. We need to shift left, and we need to have the right tools in order to do that and against those specific pain points. And so thank you, and apologies for the issues with the camera at the beginning.
Oh, it well worked out. Thank you, everyone, for your time. I appreciate everything that you do for us, and thank you for sharing the future of testing. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.